Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to absolutely shatter the modern myth of the purely objective mind. Think about the last time you got into a heated argument over politics, or maybe even a controversial call in a sports game. You probably felt completely rational, right? Like you were absolutely certain the facts were on your side. Well, we're diving into a profound psychological and philosophical concept today that literally challenges everything we think we know about how we make decisions, how we argue, and honestly, how we view reality itself.
What if the very faculty you trust to find the truth has been bribed to lie to you? Let's dive right into this dark, fascinating mystery of our own psychology. Is our intellect really a neutral judge? I mean, we love to imagine our minds are completely objective, that we just look at the evidence, weigh the facts, and follow the logic exactly where it leads. But the source material we're unpacking today presents a very different, kind of unsettling reality. Imagine your mind not as this impartial, truth-seeking scientist, but as a compromised jury member, one who's already been paid off before the trial even starts.
The foundational illusion of the modern world, according to these texts, is that human reason dispassionately follows the evidence. The truth? Reason is actually a hired gun. The authors make this incredible argument that reason isn't a sovereign king at all. It's an instrument. It operates like a brilliant but entirely crooked attorney. Seriously, think about it. When you're losing an argument, does your brain honestly try to find the objective truth? Or does it just scramble to find some clever loophole so you can win? The most important question here is never whether your mind is reasoning well. The real question is, who hired the attorney, and what verdict is it being paid to reach?
The ego's crooked attorney, the internal crime scene. Let's look at how this dynamic builds within the shadowy battlefield of human psychology.
To understand how our logic gets so compromised, we really have to look at the internal hierarchy of our own psychology. The texts map out what's essentially a corporate coup within the soul. You've got the ego, those base desires, violently taking over the heart, which is your spiritual center, just so it can weaponize your intellect. When that proper internal order breaks down, your lower desires totally bypass any moral compass. They hijack your reason to turn out arguments, doubts, and justifications for what the ego already decided it wants. So what feels to you like this deep intellectual doubt or rigorous logical debate, yeah, it's often just your ego asserting dominance, while your mind does the grunt work of coming up with the excuses.
The sources we're looking at today refer to this internal suspect as nafs al-amara, or the commanding ego. It's the lowest state of the ego, and it actively justifies sin while aggressively defending its baseline desires and self-image. Let's use an everyday example. When your alarm goes off at 5 a.m., your commanding ego instantly invents a dozen highly logical reasons why you desperately need more sleep, and why hitting snooze is actually the responsible, healthy choice. Your reason is instantly weaponized for comfort. This internal suspect is driven by pure self-preservation, because admitting ignorance or admitting fault is an absolute existential threat to its arrogance.
And this internal attorney uses a massive arsenal of psychological tricks to win its case and protect its pride. Let's walk through how this actually manifests. First up, you've got flat-out denial, just refusing to accept a painful reality, like yelling at someone while claiming, "I'm not an angry person." Then there's projection, where the ego accuses others of its own faults, calling people greedy while you're hoarding wealth. Next is rationalization. This is where the crooked attorney creates a nice veneer of logic for immoral behavior, telling you stuff like, well, I cheated because the system is rigged. Then there's cognitive dissonance, which just dismisses any contradictory evidence. And finally, sheer arrogance, or kibr, which rejects the truth simply because it comes from a source the ego looks down on. Every single one of these is just the mind acting as a very well-paid defense lawyer.
The modern secular illusion, scaling up to a global conspiracy. So what actually happens when we take this psychological malfunction and scale it up to the level of an entire civilization?
Well, the source text presents a really sharp philosophical critique of the modern secular framework. It neutrally observes that when reason is completely divorced from revelation, it simply sanctifies power. It makes oppression sound totally rational. The authors suggest that the modern West isn't an objective arbiter of truth, but rather perfidious Albion, acting entirely out of self-interest while wearing this very convincing mask of objectivity. It's a heavy concept, for sure, but a fascinating one. Throughout history, we've seen how supposedly objective science or logic has been used to justify some pretty terrible things. When human reason is made the absolute standard, it can so easily excuse cruelty, just as long as it aligns with the desires of whoever holds the power.
The text explains that the core flaw of modern secularism is secretly crowning autonomous human reason as the ultimate sovereign judge of reality. But here's the catch: reason has limits. When the agnostic framework demands that logic prove its own axioms, the mind hits a philosophical dead end known as the Munchausen trilemma. It's literally like trying to pull yourself out of a swamp by pulling up on your own hair. You can't use empiricism to empirically prove empiricism. The authors refer to this as hitting the Kantian ceiling, the idea that our brains have absolute hard limits when they try to measure the infinite. When the mind tries to play God, it just cannibalizes itself, leaving the seeker totally stranded in paralyzing skepticism.
Under this illusion of a neutral, blank sheet, the deepest, most profound elements of human life are stripped of their absolute anchors and reduced to mere social convenience. According to the analysis, once that absolute framework is removed, everything just dissolves. Worship gets downgraded to mere therapy, something you do just to feel good rather than an act of submission to the truth. Ultimate meaning, that just becomes a private preference. The texts point out that the very concept of sin is entirely erased. What was once recognized as a deep spiritual transgression is smoothly rebranded by our crooked attorney as a simple lifestyle choice or legal convenience. And this leaves individuals completely unmoored, trusting an intellect that is secretly being steered by their most baseline appetites.
The incorruptible divine judge, the metacognitive pivot. In simpler terms, how on earth do we break out of this loop where our mind just constantly justifies our ego? We have to confront the absolute bedrock epistemological divide of our time. Who judges whom? Does revelation judge reason, or does reason judge revelation? The modern secular world has quietly answered this question by placing human reason right on the throne. But what happens when we force a total reversal of that epistemological gravity? Meaning, instead of us judging the truth, what if the truth judges us? Right now, the modern mind demands that everything, even the sacred, justify itself before the court of human reason. But the text suggests that to actually cure the mind, we must enforce a radical pivot. We have to ask ourselves, what is your absolute criterion for truth? By forcing the intellect to kneel before an unbreakable orthodox rule, the authors argue you don't actually destroy your mind, you cure its arrogant delusion. Look at the left side of this philosophical divide. Autonomous human reason, acting as its own god, eventually collapses into infinite loops of doubt. It gets weaponized to serve the ego, fractures facts from moral truths, and ultimately leads to spiritual necrosis. But contrast that with the right side. When reason is anchored by revelation, by something totally outside the human skull, it is finally safe. It steps down from the exhausting, impossible role of being an ultimate judge, and it returns to being a noble, ordered servant. It aligns with objective truth and becomes a genuinely brilliant instrument. Rescuing the human intellect, submitting to the light. This brings us to the climax of the argument and the ultimate solution for finally firing your crooked attorney.
So how do we actually achieve this state where our reason works for the truth rather than against it? The texts introduce this concept of el-Furqan, or the criterion. This is an objective, unyielding anchor from outside the human self that actively separates absolute truth from falsehood. Now, the commanding ego violently hates el-Furqan. Why? Because it acts as an unbribable judge. It's the one mirror the ego absolutely cannot shatter. El-Furqan doesn't care about our self-image, and it doesn't care about our clever, logical excuses. It strips away all the rationalizations and holds us accountable for our hidden intentions, making it the one thing the crooked attorney cannot manipulate. When reason is taken out of that impossible position of playing God, it transforms from a manipulative lawyer into a brilliant lamp, held firmly by divine revelation. The beauty of this framework is that it doesn't view the intellect as a bad thing. Not at all. The intellect is an incredibly powerful tool. It just needs the right master. Once the attorney bows to the ultimate judge, it becomes an honest advocate. Your mind is still sharp, it's still analyzing, it's still reasoning brilliantly, but it's finally doing so in the light of an objective truth, completely free from the corrupting bribes of the ego. You started watching this explainer because a part of you already suspected your mind was defended what your ego had already decided. That recognition, that's a profound first step. Look, we all have that crooked attorney whispering clever loopholes and excuses in our minds every single day. So, what is your next move? Will you continue to let the ego's hired attorney defend your illusions, or will you finally dismiss it and step into the unyielding light of the criterion? Thanks for joining me, and keep questioning the source of your own certainty.